So far, my analysis on this upcoming Super Bowl and the way I've sort of viewed who I think is going to win and trying to make my prediction is just watching a lot of film, basically rewatching each of these teams' entire seasons, looking at a lot of analytics, advanced stats, not, regular stats, all of that stuff. But there's one thing I haven't done yet that I want to do because I find it fascinating. I did this last year, which is let's look at kind of what tends to tell us, what are some trends on who tends to win the Super Bowl. Let's just look at trends. We're inherently dealing with a small sample size. There's only been 55 Super Bowls, and let's be honest, how many of them, Super Bowl 4, was that even like the same sport that we watch now? It feels completely different. So it's even more small than that. But I like doing this stuff. I did this last year, and it did actually predict the correct winner. It had Tampa Bay with being right in more of these categories. So let's do it again. So first, let's talk about defensive points per drive. And the win-loss records you're going to see, because I have about 7 categories, and the win-loss records you're going to see, this is the leader in defensive points per drive, what their win-loss record has been, so basically since the data has existed. So in this case, in the past 28 Super Bowls, the data is going to change on some of these categories. But you do see that, okay, defensive points per drive does correlate to winning Super Bowls. Defense wins championships, so to speak. If you have a better defensive points per drive, you are more likely to win the Super Bowl. Makes sense. Although offensive points per drive is the same. So that's interesting. So I think a lot of people might sit here and say, okay, that makes sense. Offense, defense, both matter, so sure. But one other, I think, unique aspect in all of this is typically we view football in the year 2022 as a sport where offense wins championships. Offense matters more. You look at teams with better offenses, they tend to win more games than teams with better defenses. Even individual games, it tends to be the team with the better offense more often than not does come out on top. So that's another interesting factor here, because in the Super Bowl, that doesn't really tend to be the case. Teams with better defenses tend to win just as much as teams with better offenses do. So a little bit interesting. Again, we are dealing with small sample sizes, but fascinating. And in fact, if you just look at net points per drive, which basically means, what's your offensive points per drive, what's your defensive points per drive, and then combine them together, and then, where do you rank? Whoever had the better net points per drive, win-loss record's the same. So it's 17 and 11 for all of them. So interesting. I don't know exactly what to make of all of this, but I guess the one thing is, hey, it does help you to be better in terms of net points per drive, offensive points per drive, and defensive points per drive. As for the Vegas favorites, so what's interesting here is that the actual win-loss record for all 55 Super Bowls is heavily in the Vegas favorite is more likely to win. But in the past, I should say 20, not 19 Super Bowls, it is just 10 and 10. So in the past 20 Super Bowls, literally the Vegas favorite has won 50% of the time. There's been no correlation as to who is actually going to win. And I find that interesting. And part of what makes me think about it is I think about these old Super Bowls. You saw some, decent amount of double-digit Vegas favorites, whereas now that was before the salary cap era, right? Where you saw like those Steelers teams that were always really good. Every now and then you'll have a pretty big spread, but for the most part, these spreads tend to be pretty close anyways. So that kind of does make a little bit more sense as to why it's evened out these past 20 years, although the fact that it's all the way even is interesting. Now let's go over here, because now we're getting to some really kind of unique stats that I don't think many people would have guessed. So the team with the better record since 1998 has a much worse chance of winning the Super Bowl. The team with the better record is 5-14 in Super Bowls since 1998. You might notice the math seems a little bit weird here. That's because a few times the teams had the same record. So those ones, obviously, you can't factor in. If you think about last year's Super Bowl, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did have a worse record. And part of you thinks, okay, well, it's probably just a small sample size. Obviously, being a better team means you're more likely to win. But there could be something said for the contrary. If you have a worse record, but still manage to get to the Super Bowl, it could mean a couple of things. A, it could mean, like Tampa Bay last year, it just took them a while to find their groove, but once they did, they were really able to thrive, and so they were actually better than their record. Another thing might just be that you're battle-tested. I think being battle-tested probably is a real thing, of being able to have the mindset of, okay, things didn't go our way, but we can come back. I also think about last year's Super Bowl. The Kansas City Chiefs were not battle-tested whatsoever. They only lost one game with their starting starters in. So when they kind of got punched in the mouth in the Super Bowl, they didn't know how to handle it and kind of imploded on themselves. Whereas, I think a team like Cincinnati this year, for example, who doesn't have the better record, them getting down early in the AFC Championship game, they were able to battle back. So there might be something there. It might be worthless. I don't know, but it's interesting. Also, this one, the better quarterback season in terms of passer rating, also has a less high chance of winning the Super Bowl. Only 8 and 15, the teams that had the better quarterback season according to passer rating, which is another interesting stat there. Again, it could just factor into the small sample size stuff, but let's think about it. Is there a reason that this could be the case? And yeah, there's a reason. Like, it could be just, quite frankly, as simple as if your team good enough to make the Super Bowl with not as good of a quarterback, you probably have more talent around that quarterback. So maybe teams that don't rely on the quarterback as much in a big game where you usually have the two best teams in football going up against each other, there probably will be times when you need to rely on guys who aren't just the quarterback. So having the guy who doesn't have as good of a passer rating does mean that you are more likely to win the Super Bowl. Just kind of that weird stat. And some people might also say, couldn't this just be a passer rating, doesn't make a lot of sense stat? But if you look at PFF grades, it's a smaller sample size. It doesn't go back as far, but they also are, less likely to win. It's not quite as dramatic, but still 6 and 8, the team with the quarterback who has the better PFF grades. So all of this is interesting. How much does it matter? I still don't know, but it's something to look at. So the final chart here is going to be just Cincinnati and the Rams and how they match up in each of these categories right here. Last year I did 7. This year I only have 6 because last year was if they had played each other before. These two teams haven't played each other before, so I threw that out. The defensive points per drive goes in Cincinnati's favor, although I do have to mention it's very close with them and the Rams. They're almost, even in terms of defensive points per drive. Offensive points per drive does favor the Rams, and net points per drive does favor the Rams. The Rams are also the Vegas favorite, so that's a point in their favor. Although, Cincinnati gets the benefit of having the worst record, right? Because the better record points go in Cincinnati's favor because they do not have the better record. And since the Rams have the better record, they're less likely to win. So that's why there's an asterisk next to that one. And also better QB season, as Joe Burrow has, whether you want to use a passer rating or you want to use Pro Football Focus grade, Joe Burrow is better than Matt Stafford in both of those two categories. But regardless, that actually is benefit to the Rams according to this system. How much stock am I taking into the system? Basically none, but I do find it interesting, and if you do take stock into the system, well then that means it's in the Rams' favor because they lead in 4 out of these 6 categories. The only categories that they're worse in are they have a slight downgrade in terms of defensive points per drive, and they have a better record. So those are the issues there. And also, the better record thing, that might largely come down to these teams that are 14-2 or 15-1. The Rams are, they're 12-5. They've lost a decent amount. They are still battle tested. So if that theory is correct, that teams that aren't battle tested struggle in the Super Bowl, well, the Rams are battle tested, so that shouldn't be a struggle. Although I think you could also argue that if the theory of the better quarterback season is that it's a quarterback who is dragging a worse roster to the Super Bowl and then falling short, well, I don't know if that's the case either. Joe Burrow's amazing, but they have talent around Joe Burrow as well. It's not like he's doing it himself either. Like we've seen some teams that basically get into the Super Bowl on the strength of their quarterback. Well, I mean, obviously, Joe Burrow's the biggest reason they're in the Super Bowl, but he's not the only reason. So you could also throw that one out. I don't know. Just an interesting exercise. So what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. What are your thoughts on this? I don't know. I find it interesting. So, yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And, of course, as always, thanks for watching.